Hello. Thank you for being patient with us, although usually we're about this late any time, whether there's a technical difficulty or not. But it gives people a chance to kind of file in a little later than the start time.
And have a little drink while we're waiting.
Thank you all for coming to this Literary Libations event, where we will be talking about Willa Cather. Of course, Ken Sanders Rare Books, and I'm Bill Allred from X96. This is Literary Libations. You can find us at the letsgoeatshow.com. And this is Jimmy Santangelo, the benevolent despot of the Wine Academy of Utah. And Jimmy, do you want to talk about the cocktails first?
Absolutely. I'd like to welcome, on the coattails of what Bill has said, thank you all for joining us this evening or this late afternoon. I don't know what anyone else is doing, but I know what we're doing. We're having sparkling wine, we're having charcuterie, we're having a cocktail, and we're hanging out with this great function. We do this each and every month here at Ken Sanders Rare Books.
Jimmy, I believe this is our fourth one.
Our fourth one, yeah. We started in November, and it's a great opportunity for us to bring the community together. I always find bubbles brings communities together. I don't know what it is, but it was about a year ago when I was first officially introduced to Ken Sanders. And we were talking about this concept, and originally we were just going to have Ken and I chat about a book, and I was going to make cocktails and go back and forth. But then I said, this is bigger. This is bigger than just literary libations where people sit. We need to have, and I brought Bill, and I introduced this to Bill Allred.
Jimmy should point out the fact that he doesn't know how to read as well.
Yeah. And Bill only talks on the radio.
I read menus and wine books and all kinds of things. But it was really nice. And just on a personal note, I feel we're real fortunate to have two fabrics of our community, Bill Allred and Ken Sanders, come together and weave together such a beautiful event such as this Literary Libations. So I'm going to invite everybody, and I do have a joiner, and I'm going to get you a glass of sparkling wine. Let's raise a glass in thanks to these two gentlemen. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers to you.
Bill?
Yes, Ken.
Do we even know how to weave?
No, I don't know how to weave.
I can't weave. Knit weavers. He said we were big weavers. Did he
we
mean weevils? He meant bolt weevils. He meant weevils, right?
No, Ken, he meant we are part of the fabric of the community. The glorious tapestry that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
The tablecloth?
Yeah, that's what you meant. Nice to see you all here. Thank you for coming. We're going to be talking about Willa Cather, as you know. And feel free as we progress here, or regress, or digress, feel free to raise your hands and participate. It can be a discussion, if you like.
If you can get a word in edgewise, it will be a discussion.
Yeah.
You got to do your part.
Yeah, I always try to get a word. This is the only person I ever have trouble getting a word in edgewise with, Ken Sanders. We will. So feel free to participate. Some of you may be. Are all of you familiar with Willa Cather? No.
Oh, high degree.
So
Charles Bowden, one person in the room, knew his work.
Yeah, last one we
totally
did.
Opposite.
Yeah, it wasn't you, Barbara. No, it wasn't. Nice to see you here again, though. Very nice to see you here again. Now we'll just get started, I guess. Do you want to do anything before we talk about Willa Cather?
Should we start with a sparkling?
Wait, hang on.
Tell us about the cocktail, Jimmy.
You got it. So we're starting with a sparkling wine. We like to do that because sparkling wine is so engaging. It's so welcoming. It's not just for breakfast anymore. And sparkling wines can be made all over the world. And we selected a classic wine growing region, France. And what you have here before you is available in the state of Utah, and it's Vin de France. So meaning the fruit, the grapes, are sourced from various wine growing regions throughout France, throughout the country. I came across this little number a couple of months ago, and it just kind of punches outside its weight class. I'm using a couple of analogies, I don't mean to, but it has a really great mouthfeel, good acidity, cleanses the palate, and we needed something to cleanse our wash Saturday off our palate, right? Wash Saturday off our palate. But what I'm doing is I prepared, and each month, we like to pair a cocktail with the author or the theme. And this month, I needed some input. And Natalie, your manager, your general manager here, Natalie, she said, you know, Jimmy, we need something to pair with this great author, Willa Cather. We need something earthy. We need something floral. We need something serious to match with this author. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I thought floral, okay. And earthy, I immediately thought tequila. That's kind of divisive, like tequila. You're either tequila or like, you know, you're not with tequila. Reminds a lot of people of freshman room college, right? You know, tequila. So the second one I thought was gin. So this gin's been aged in a barrel. That's where it's gained the color. So the reason I picked that is because to pair with this author of the celebration of the focus of her writing is the mid to late 1800s. That struggle of going across on on those wagons, bada boom, bada bing, little Italian in there, bada boom, bada bing. The gin was transported in barrel, and that's how it gained that color. Usually along the coasts, they distill it right away to the bars, and it keeps its clarity, not when it transports. Then I wanted to identify with the struggle of their travel, and I wanted this bitter Italian liqueur. You might have heard of something called Campari before. This is its bigger brother called Cappelletti. Cappelletti is an Italian red bitter liqueur where it's both bitter and sweet at the same time, kind of like my nanu growing up. And then we have to finish the sweet vermouth as a reward of the finishing of those travels. So what we have here...
After that long, shaken up wagon ride, you're going to need a little vermouth.
Yeah.
That's right. So what we have here is a barrel-aged gin Negroni, and it's equal parts 1 to 1 to 1 of your barrel-aged gin. This is, somebody mentioned it, by Beehive Distilling, a local distillery, aged in Chardonnay barrels. And then we have the Cappelletti bitter liqueur, and then going to France, the French Dolin vermouth. And when I say 1 to 1 to 1, and I'm going to wrap up here, when I say 1 to 1 to 1, it can be, you know, a 2 count, a 1 count, whatever your portion or ratio is.
How did your Nana do it, Jimmy?
My Nana, I'm glad you asked. I was about to say. I
set him up, you know.
She was a bookkeeper, so she liked to count, but she used an abacus. So while pouring, she was like, oh, I can't. She's pouring. I can't reach the 1.
Then she had a little sip.
Yeah. So this is an official. Everybody hold up your pinky. Pinky promise. This is an official Utah pour. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And as you can see, I built it in the glass, and what the technique of cocktail making is when you build a cocktail, you're putting in the vessel that you're about to enjoy. But there's no ice in this yet. So what I'm going to do as we begin, as I throw it over, I'm going to integrate ice, and I'm going to stir down each one of these. So this is your own personal mixing glass. Thanks, guys.
Now, Jim, will you be doing that while we're doing the presentation? Yeah, you'll just Okay. Thanks. Let's talk a little bit about just biographical information of Willa Cather. Born Willa Cather, Seibert Cather. Thanks. In 1873, born in Virginia. Her family moved to Nebraska when she was 9 years old.
Red Cloud,
Nebraska, where she experienced the frontier life that would profoundly influence her writing. She attended the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, developed her writing skills there. She worked as a journalist and teacher in Pittsburgh before moving to New York City. She worked for McClure's magazine in New York. I don't believe that exists anymore.
No, it was huge in the day.
Yeah. Cather gained recognition for her novels depicting the pioneer experience, including O Pioneers, The Song of the Lark, and My Ántonia. She received the Pulitzer Prize for her novel One of Ours.
1923.
Yeah.
And Sinclair Lewis on accepting his Pulitzer Prize, said this award should have gone to Willa Cather.
Her works explored the themes of nostalgia, very, very nostalgic for the pioneer lifestyle in the Midwest, the American frontier, and the struggles of immigrant settlers, who she obviously had a great feeling for and sympathy and empathy for. She continued to write acclaimed novels like Death Comes for the Archbishop in 1927. She lived for many years with her partner Edith Lewis. She died in 1947 in New York City. That's Willa Cather, and Ken shared a quote about her from Sinclair Lewis. I had one that I thought was quite remarkable, if I can find it here. She, so after he wrote The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald said, my novel, The Great Gatsby, is a failure when I compare it to My Ántonia. That's pretty remarkable. And Wallace Stevens, great sort of modernist poet, said, we have nothing better than she is. She takes so much pains to conceal her sophistication that it's easy to miss her quality. She wrote in this very plain, simple style, which is so, I mean, I'd never read her before we started preparing to do this event. And I was I was reading My Ántonia and I read 10 pages and I looked up and said to my wife, hey, this lady really knows how to turn a phrase. She really knows how to turn a phrase. And of course, Ken was personal friends with Willa Cather, so maybe we should.
I met her at a grain silo outside of Red Cloud.
Right. I don't think you better go any further with that story.
In Willa Cather's day, she came out of this era before her. Probably her biggest mentor would have been Edith Wharton. She came of age after Theodore Dreiser. She came of age exactly at the time of Sherwood Anderson. And she held her own with all the greats of the 20s and the 30s, including Fitzgerald, Steinbeck, Faulkner, and Hemingway. Hemingway, she wrote one war-based book, and he pretty much trashed her. He
didn't care. I read a couple of quotes from him. He did not care for Willa Cather at all. No. Of course, he was always so kind to most women in his life,
including the 5 or 6 wives. And didn't everybody in Hemingway's family, including himself, commit suicide?
Oh, geez.
Or going to?
That's sad. That's a sad story.
That's different. But Willa, she won the Pulitzer Prize. She was as big as an author could get. And, I don't give a shit about this, but we have to deal with it. She was a woman, and she was a lesbian woman. We have to, right?
Oh, well, okay, if we have to talk about lesbians, then let's.
She stayed with the same partner for the last almost 40 years of her life in New York City. And you told me something I didn't know earlier. She outlived Willa Cather by decades.
Yeah, her name was. Let's give her. Her name was. She shared the home in Manhattan. Willa Cather shared a home in Manhattan with Edith Lewis. Who was an editor, and that's how they met. She edited some of her magazine and articles and things. They lived together for 40 years. Edith Lewis, their relationship was widely understood by many scholars to have been a lifelong romantic partnership. However, Willa never talked about this kind of thing, ever. She was a very private person. Scholars have combed through her private letters, never once mentions what her sexuality was, and I think I got the impression that it just didn't, she thought this does not matter to anybody.
Amen.
This should not matter to anybody.
But of course it did, especially in those days. As she came of age as a young woman, a girl in Red Cloud, Nebraska, she cut off her long auburn hair. She wore she had a Uncle Will that died or served. He may have died. I've forgotten that part. But she had his ball cap, and his Civil War hat, and she wore that incessantly. She dressed and acted like a tomboy.
She told everybody to call me William. I'm William now. I think she was like 17, 18. Call me William. A lot of people say the first thing she wanted to do with her life was become a surgeon. She was very fascinated by that, and but you know, there were probably no women surgeons, or very few at that time. That was a man's job. And so she was kind of trying to try that identity on. But it didn't last long. She became Willa Cather. She started to study literature and began to write. And one thing about Edith Lewis, her longtime partner, and Ken, you were leading me into that, and I didn't quite get to it. Edith Lewis died. Now, Willa Cather died in what, 1947? Edith Lewis, her partner, died not until 1972, 25 years after Willa Cather died, and she was buried beside Willa Cather in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. And I think that's a testament to their relationship and to, you know, I mean, it was, yeah.
Do we know if Edith was significantly chronologically younger than Willa? Was she younger than Willa?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she, because Willa was born 1879.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she was probably 75, 80 when she died.
She was 75 when she died.
So I doubt Edith was 125.
Yeah, no, she died so Willa died in 1947 and
72, you said.
72. Edith Lewis died in 72. She was, but it doesn't matter to her writing really. What her sexuality is, I don't think it matters at all.
No,
but.
No.
But, you know, people have to write dissertations and doctoral dissertations. Well, I'm going to write about Willa Cather's lesbianism, and I don't think it matters at all. There is so where do you want to go now, Ken? We could talk about her.
I want to get back to what matters in Willa Cather's life is that Midwestern landscape still the edge of the frontier. Yeah, it was farm country back then, but it was a Midwest that we no longer know. The Midwest of the 19th to the early 20th century was a Midwest where, you know, grasses grew so tall buffalo could hide in them easily, where you had rich, before you get to the 100th meridian, which is where Wallace Stegner says the West begins. And why did he pick the 100th meridian? Because that's where the dryness begins. East of the 100th meridian, you used to have 30 feet fertile soil that just, if you didn't grow shit in it, you'd be some kind of stupid. And Willa Cather, that's what matters about Willa Cather, that background, because that haunts all of her work. And I said this already, she became as good as any of her peers. She was perhaps the best American novelist of the first half of the 20th century. She held her own with Faulkner and Hemingway and Steinbeck.
When she went to the Nebraska, and she was like 9 years old or something like that, very, very young, the character in My Ántonia is Willa Cather talking about it. She talks about being unhappy being there for about a year and then realizing this was the best place on earth. And she described that her first look at the prairie when they got off the train. They got on a horse and buggy and to go find the house of their relatives, and they're trotting across the plains. And when she first sees the Nebraska prairie, said there was nothing but land, not a country at all, but the material out of which countries are made. Man, woman could turn a phrase.
Beautiful. So, what I got one more thing to say about Willa Cather in her time. Willa Cather won a Pulitzer Prize for one of ours in 1923. John Steinbeck won a Pulitzer Prize for Grapes of Wrath in 1940. Hemingway won a Pulitzer Prize for Old Man in the Sea in 1953. Faulkner won a Pulitzer Prize for his last novel, Early Autumn, in 1963. Willa took it in 23. And F. Scott Fitzgerald never won a Pulitzer Prize. The Great Gatsby was published in 1927. Louis Bromfield won the Pulitzer Prize that year.
Who?
Yeah.
Anybody? I have no idea who that is. I think that's great. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, "My novel, The Great Gatsby, is a failure when I compare it to My Ántonia." Here, just another example of how she wrote about the prairie, and this is in My Ántonia. The new country lay open before me. There were no fences in those days, and I could choose my own way over the grass uplands, trusting the pony to get me home again. Sometimes I followed the sunflower-bordered roads. Fuchs told me that the sunflowers were introduced into that country by the Mormons, that at the time of the persecution, when they left Missouri and struck out into the wilderness to find a place where they could worship God in their own way, the members of the first exploring party crossing the plains to Utah scattered sunflower seed as they went, and then the next summer, when the long trains of wagons came through with all the women and children, they had the sunflower trail to follow. I believe that botanists do not confirm Fuchs' story, but insist that the sunflower was native to those plains. Nevertheless, the legend has stuck in my mind, and sunflower-bordered roads always seem to me the roads to freedom.
And these sunflowers were the size of 6-foot, 8-foot trees.
Yeah. Oh, no, those great, huge which I've tried to grow in my yard occasionally, and I have, because I like this, because I want the seeds, but then the birds always get them. But those gigantic sunflower heads just blow me away. I love them.
But so I think, as you just did, Bill, we got to give Willa her own voice here, because it's so important. I got a few. We can go back and forth here if you want.
Okay.
Got a few things here that really struck me. This is more from the introduction of this ominous volume of her works. After they got to Red Cloud, Willa's father opened a mortgage and loan office, and the Cather family, which included 7 boys and girls, became part of the little community. As a child, Willa participated fully in the life of the town and also observed everything going on around her. She was part and parcel of an environment, yet she was completely different. She would retain this duality all of her life. When she was 12, she cropped her tangle of long auburn hair, short as a boy's, adopted shirts and jackets for her daily attire, and wore her father's Civil War cap everywhere she went. In her spare time, she liked to dissect frogs and read books. She carefully built a library, inscribing each book the name she chose for herself, William Cather, Jr. She also liked to call herself William Cather, M.D., and dreamed of becoming a doctor. Young Willa was fascinated by everyone she met, especially the immigrants whose sod houses dotted the lonely divide. The Danes, the Swedes, the Czechs, the French, the Germans and Bohemians who had moved west to build the railroads and populate the barren land.
We'll do a couple more of these just because they're so great.
Yeah, let's do it. Your turn.
July came on with that breathless, brilliant heat, which makes the plains of Kansas and Nebraska the best corn country in the world. It seemed as if we could hear the corn growing in the night. Under the stars, one caught a faint crackling in the dewy, heavy-odored cornfields where the feathered stalks stood so juicy and green. The cornfields were far apart in those times, with miles of wild grazing land between. It took a clear, meditative eye like my grandfather's to foresee that they would enlarge and multiply until they would be not the Shimerda's cornfields or Mr. Bushy's, but the world's cornfields. that their yield would be one of the greatest economic facts, like the wheat crops of Russia, which underlie all the activities of men in war or in peace.
In My Ántonia, Willa Cather achieved the flawless natural prose that would create a new style of American writing and make Ántonia famous around the world. The story is rooted in the Nebraska landscape and set against the seasons. On the farm, the weather was the great fact, and men's affairs went on underneath it as the streams creep under the ice.
Okay, one more for me. They're out in the fields, and she's with her friends, or Jim is with Jim is Willa Cather, but so Jim is with his friends out there. Presently, we saw a curious thing. There were no clouds, and the sun was going down in a limpid. And by the way, I would like your opinions on what this passage means, what it's about. Let me start again. Presently, we saw a curious thing. There were no clouds. The sun was going down in a limpid, gold-washed sky. Just as the lower edge of the red disk rested on the high fields against the horizon, a great black figure suddenly appeared on the face of the sun. We sprang to our feet, straining our eyes toward it. In a moment, we realized what it was. On some upland farm, a plow had been left standing in the field. The sun was sinking just behind it, magnified across the distance by the horizontal light. It stood out against the sun. It was exactly contained within the circle of the disk, the handles, the tongue, the share, black against the molten red. There it was, heroic in size, a picture writing on the sun. She references this later on in the novel, My Ántonia, recalling this moment, saying it was like that moment when that plow was against us. But what is that? I puzzled over that, and I have formed some conclusions. But what is that? What's she trying to do with that passage? What's she striving for there?
Two more, and then let's open it up and get their opinion. Okay?
Okay, sure.
I do not remember crossing the Missouri River or anything about the long day's journey through Nebraska. Probably by that time, I had crossed so many rivers that I was dull to them. The only thing very noticeable about Nebraska was that it was still all day long Nebraska.
Yeah.
And lastly, there seemed to be nothing to see, no fences, no creeks or trees, no hills or fields. If there was a road, I could not make it out in the faint starlight. This is from her first journey to Red Cloud after getting off the train at midnight. If there was nothing but land, not a country at all, but the material out of which countries are made. No, there was nothing but land, slightly undulating, I knew, because often our wheels ground against the brake as we went down into a hollow and lurched up again on the other side. I had the feeling that the world was left behind, that we had got over the edge of it. We were outside man's jurisdiction. I'd never before looked up at the sky when there was not a familiar mountain ridge against it. But this was the complete dome of heaven, all there was of it. I did not believe that my dead mother and father were watching me from up there. They would still be looking for me at the sheepfold down by the creek or along the white road that led to the mountain pastures. I had left even their spirits behind me. The wagon jolted on, carrying me I knew not whither. I don't think I was homesick. If we never arrived anywhere, it did not matter. Between that earth and that sky, I felt erased, blotted out. I did not say my prayers that night. Here, I felt what would be would be.
So, any thoughts about any of all of that?
So, our crowd, they I think every single one of them is familiar and has read Willa Cather. So, what do you guys think? Who wants to talk?
Yeah.
And Andy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of the book. At the heart of the book is what we would call like natural mysticism.
Natural. For those of you in the back, Andy's talking about natural mysticism.
Well, I mean, it would be my reading, and so it seems like to me with the scenes you got. So this expanse is sort of like a timelessness, right? It's like it's infinite, and so within time, and that's where she's moving along. And even with the manifestation of this human-made thing, the object in the sun, which is a manifestation of the infinite. But the notion of mysticism is basically the disappearance, what Ken just read, of the body into the infinite where there is no self. And that the passage at the end of the first one you read, but then the chapter that ends with death, it's the same thing as the death of the self, right? So she's dealing with this constant like birth and death of the self, and what happens when the self dies? It's the infinite. Right?
So just to go back to
that would be my.
But just to go back to that plow, it's almost like it was an emblem, an idol, or a man-made sort of. It was almost worshipful of that plow. That was. It was more than just a plow. It was an emblem. It was emblematic of something worshipful.
Take the plow, but then take the plow and compare it to her parents. You read about her parents, right? So take the plow, which is a piece of metal made by humans, created from the earth, and compare it to her parents.
You had a comment back there?
Yeah, so I was struck by something that's an extension of what you read about After Day, It's Still Nebraska, sort of featureless, because she wrote, or Jim supposedly wrote, that in Nebraska they really take care of their trees because it adds feature. That's a bit like the plow. It's flat, undulating maybe, but featureless. It's the stuff that makes landscape, but isn't landscape. It's sort of the contrast between Jim or Willa loving Nebraska and describing Nebraska as something that I would want to get through, but I can't because After a Day, it's still Nebraska.
Others?
Yeah, I think too that it's just a momentary symbol of what humans are doing to create that world that she talks about. But death is a major topic, and that symbol disappears into the greater world as well. So it's that momentary piece of being human before you're actually consumed by nature. And if you don't mind, I want to read my favorite passage.
Sure.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. Can you do it really loud?
Give her a microphone.
Yeah.
Or Jimmy's got a microphone. He'll hold it for you.
I might not have the cord length.
Well, she can come to you.
Would you like to read it at the stand?
Not really, but I would.
I think
I didn't mean to be on stage.
Just remember, everybody's looking at you.
I think what's important to take away from Willa Cather's.
Yeah, I'm now
now
from our most VIP guest we have. No pressure.
What's your name, by the way?
Put the microphone lower for her. Jimmy, lower it.
I offered to do this, but this is my favorite.
Welcome to the comedy portion of our show.
Grab it, or are you going to read it?
Which one is? What is this from?
It's from My Ántonia, and it's the end of chapter 2 in the first section.
Okay.
Page 336. Making that up.
363 if you're on
Oh,
Kindle.
I was close.
I became something that lay below the sun and felt it, like the pumpkins, and I did no longer need to be something extra. I was entirely happy. Perhaps we sense like that when we die and end up part of something entire, whether it's far sun and air or goodness and knowledge. At any rate, that is happiness, to be dissolved into something entire and super. When it comes to one, it comes as obviously as sleep. So I think that partly explains
Yeah.
what you were getting at. That image of the farm equipment just gets it's part of death.
I have that same passage highlighted here, and I was looking for it, and then I went, oh wait, that's the one she's reading.
So the takeaway, as important as the land is to all of virtually everything Willa wrote, and her descriptions and the way she makes the land come alive are brilliant. And it's really easy to miss almost all the writing about the land bill. It's in metaphor.
It's like Wallace Stevens said. She doesn't put on any airs. She writes very plainly, and it makes you almost miss how well it's written.
Yeah. But the story, her novels and short stories would fall apart without the people and how brilliantly she describes them.
I have an interesting story from My Ántonia about a bull named Brigham Young.
That's a good one.
And I did a little research into this, actually, to see what that was all about. Because it just says, we had two bulls. One was named Gladstone, one was named Brigham Young. And then she doesn't explain
I think, Bill,
that.
we should raise a glass of the cocktail paired tonight to this next passage, I think. Just cheers. Cheers you all.
So, why is a bull named Brigham Young in My Ántonia? Well, here's what Willa Cather had to say about it in a letter to her editor. Quote, seriously, I'm willing to change the name of my bull to Andrew Jackson for this edition of 1,000 only. I do it as an accommodation to you, not for $500, but because you helped me save Ántonia from Grant Wood. What? I went, what? What does she mean by that? Well, of interest here, it had been proposed that My Ántonia would be illustrated by the famous artist Grant Wood. American Gothic, and is that what that's what it's called, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The farm couple.
Yeah. Cather did not care for his work at all, and she convinced the publisher to go with a different illustrator. Now, they were both considered, they're contemporaries, and they were both considered artists of the plains, artists of the, but she thought he was too idealized and she just didn't like him. And they kept trying to push him. No, really, he's so popular, we should have him illustrate. But this editor stood up for her and said, no, we'll go with someone else. And I meant to look up who that was, but so they went with another illustrator whom she liked. But she continues, please, she's talking to the editor in a letter, when you return from Florida, write me an agreement signed by yourself and another officer of the company to the effect that the bull's name is to be changed for 1,000 copies only. My grandfather's two bulls were named Gladstone and Brigham Young. I like both names. One refers to disposition, stubborn, Gladstone, and the other to physical adequacy. What? But why did the proposal to change the name of the bull Brigham Young come up in the first place? A bookseller in Utah named Ken Sanders wanted to buy, for some special market, 1,000 copies of My Ántonia at the full regular wholesale price, a transaction that would produce $500 in royalties, which is pretty good money at the time, for Willa Cather herself. The bookseller pointed out the fact that the two bulls in the novel are named Gladstone and Brigham Young, and that would make the book unsuitable for his purposes. And he requested a special change. And she said to the editor, I'll do it if that's what you want, because you helped me out with that Grant Wood thing. It's not for the $500. I'll do it for you because the publisher will make money as well. So I'll change that. He said, maybe I should change it to Ferdinand, which would be absolutely the wrong name. And just as a final note here on why the bull may have been named Brigham Young in the first place, Well, the Mormon pioneers had a lot of it.
He had 57 wives.
Well, and as a matter of fact, typically a mature bull can service between 25 and 35 cows, and some very fertile bulls can service up to 50 cows. So
Aptly named.
Aptly named. What really disturbs me about the story, and that's the deepest research I did, but the parts I read said there is no indication as to whether this ever happened or not. It would be something interesting for an antiquarian bookseller like you to find out. Were those 1,000 copies ever printed? And if they were, with the names changed, they'd be worth a hell of a lot of money.
I'm simply going to say to that, Bill, no. It doesn't mean no, I won't research it, or no, there wasn't
You don't think
that edition existed.
It just didn't ever happen.
I'm not telling you which no I mean.
Oh, Ken's got all 1,000 copies right up there. He's just sitting on them.
If you want to buy one, see me after the show. Oh, okay, so you know what?
What?
Grant Wood, I agree with Willa Cather. They could have solved it if they had picked Thomas Hart Benton to illustrate My Ántonia. That would have been a knockout. So, as I looked about me, I felt that the grass was the country, as the water is the sea. The red of the grass made all the great prairie the color of wine stains or of certain seaweeds when they are first washed up. And there was so much motion in it. The whole country seemed somehow to be running. All the years that have passed have not dimmed my memory of that first glorious autumn. The new country lay open before me. There was no fences in those days, and I could choose my way over the grass uplands, trusting the pony to get me home again, Bill, as you read earlier. As any of you have ever spent time around horses or cows or ranches, I can't tell you how many times, lost in the Uintas or lost in a blizzard or in the dark, that if you just loosen those reins and let that horse is going to find that goddamn barn every single time.
Yeah, when I was a kid riding horses with my grandfather, he would always put me on that kind of a horse, which wanted to go back to the barn no matter what the hell I did.
What direction you wanted to go. Okay. Sometimes I followed the sunflower-bordered roads. Fuchs told me that sunflowers were in a oh, never mind. You read that one. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done for a minute.
You're done?
Well,
that just leaves me in the lurch then, doesn't it?
Well, yeah. Is that an Addams Family reference?
No.
It is now.
Does anybody know what Ken meant when I said I'm in the lurch and he said this? Did anyone, if you knew what he meant, laugh at his joke?
Oh, please.
No, I don't hear.
I don't care if other people laugh at my jokes. They're funny to me, Bill.
As we walked homeward, I didn't want to read this one yet, but I'll do it now because you said it was my turn. As we walked homeward across the fields, and this is again just one of those passages where you go, I read stuff like this sometimes, and I almost crack up. I almost start to cry because it's so beautifully written. There are poems that I could read sometimes, and they don't really mean that much to me personally, but I appreciate how they are written, and it cracks me up that somebody is so good that they can put words together like that. As we walked homeward across the fields, the sun dropped and lay like a golden globe in the low west. While it hung there, the moon rose in the east, as big as a cartwheel, pale silver and streaked with rose color, thin as a bubble or a ghost moon. For 5, perhaps 10 minutes, the two luminaries confronted each other across the level land, resting on opposite edges of the world.
That's some heavy stuff.
You can't. You just can't. I've tried to write things in my life and write poems in my life, and then I go, well, what the hell am I doing?
Willa Cather already beat me there.
You know, she had difficulty with her career a lot of times because of her political views. So we think of Willa Cather as what a wonderful artistic free. She was pretty conservative, and the ideas of conservatism change. The kind of conservative she was perhaps. Please, for God's sake, don't think of MAGA people. Don't think of that at all. She was not that kind of a conservative, but she expressed a growing distaste for the modern industrial world. She often idealized the past. As she said, people were more virtuous and they were better a long time ago. And that nostalgia for a simpler time is, considered a conservative viewpoint. And her writing sometimes reflected a skepticism toward progressivism and modern concepts. And historical records show that those political views hurt her career. Her career was she took off like gangbusters pretty much. She was very successful. And then people say, but she's anti-progressive. Her conservative views contributed to a fluctuating reception of her work among critics. It was the goddamn critics who really started in on her. Well, isn't this wonderful, all this great nostalgia and all of that? But she doesn't believe in progressive views. People thought she was out of step with the prevailing trends of the 20th century. And her artistic contributions were undeniable, even though she had those kind of conservative views, and it didn't ruin her career. She rescued her career by keeping writing and writing beautifully.
And the takeaway? She was as big as any American writer could dream of being, male or female, in her day. And as Bill points out, there was a falling off, maybe due to political conservatism. But what I found most fascinating today, and we're talking close to 100 years, more than 202 years since she won the Pulitzer Prize, for crying out loud. But today, I think all of you that have come today and all of you that know Willa Cather are here because we still believe. We've reading My Ántonia, because I read her a very long time ago, has been a really great pleasure. And it brings back how powerful she is as a writer. But for God's sake, if I have first editions of the aforementioned boys and the one girl, I can get $500,000 out of a signed Willa Cather and the same Steinbeck, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Faulkner, it'd be $25,000, or it'd be $5,000 at $25,000, and it's like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know from you guys how you came to Willa Cather. How did you come to Willa Cather, and why? To be honest, I think I said this at the beginning. I knew the name. Never had read it. Never had read her, ever. My wife, she's from a family of huge readers. They read voraciously all the time. And she said, oh, yeah, I read that My Ántonia, 20 years ago. I don't remember that much about it, but I read it. I know I read it and liked it, loved it. But how some of you talk about how you came to and what it was that struck a chord in you when you read it? I bet a lot of you read it when you were really young. Yeah?
I think there's some fans out there.
Somebody? Who? Yeah.
Share your story.
Yeah.
And then you.
I'm originally from Nebraska.
Well, there you go.
And her depictions, she and Marie Sandoz are considered absolute.
We're going to be doing Marie later on. Clearly, Marie Sandoz was inspired by Willa Cather.
Willa Cather also is listed, I think, on one of the 100 best, or the books.
My Ántonia is, yeah.
America, number one. Her descriptions, if you've ever been to Nebraska, the western part depict beautifully that cloud in front of the sun going down. It is wide open space. It is gorgeous. And she is considered a hero in Nebraska.
So when you growing up in Nebraska, you had to read Willa Cather.
I didn't have to read. I wanted to.
But I mean, everybody, kids in Nebraska, pretty much.
It was just, she's considered a hero. In fact, in Red Cloud, which is very close to the Kansas border, there is the Willa Cather Foundation today.
Right, I saw that. And her house is all restored.
House is restored, and she was just one of those institutions. And if you go to the University of Nebraska, I mean, she's named as one of those people. So her writing is beautiful, it is simplistic, it's realistic, and it leaves you with a memory.
It's, again, beautiful and simplistic, but that almost hides how profound it is.
Amen. Amen. I think she was a woman of her time and long before anybody else. I really do.
Anybody?
And, oh, you want to know something else?
Yeah, the next
Can I
table.
just make one other comment?
Of course.
Her lesbian is never mentioned in Nebraska, but once again, they're very conservative.
Well, we can't talk about that. But it doesn't matter. Who else had something?
This lady had a...
The first time I read My Ántonia, I was in like middle school because my brother was in college and it was required reading. So I would read whatever he had lying around on the shelf while he was living at home. But I didn't really like love it intensely like I do until like 2003. I grew up here and I moved to New York City. And I just like, even though the book doesn't take place here, like all of my like nostalgia and like sentimentality about home, like trying to explain where I was from to like the average New Yorker. Like now they all know where Salt Lake City is because of like the housewives or like whatever. But like, you know, I would be talking to a cat from like Pakistan and they'd be like, where are you from? And I'd be like, kind of like Las Vegas. And they'd be like, oh, okay, like out there where it's dry. And I just, you know, like you were talking about getting choked up. Like the last 3 paragraphs of this book, I can just think about them and I get emotional. Like when I chose to move back here, that drive across the country, like Nebraska takes forever. All of those states just take forever. But I read it while I was driving back here with all my stuff in the moving truck, and I was just like, this is my favorite book. Like every time I've ever read it, which I think is probably like 4 times now, it's just, I don't know, I just discover something else about it that's like subtle, that as I've aged, like my perception of it gets a little richer, you know.
It's something you should read every 10 years or so, maybe. Yeah. Somebody else, your experience. Yeah, tall table.
Well, my father was an English teacher, and he gave me a copy of My Ántonia when I was in high school, and I've been reading her ever since. But I also have a question for you. I don't know if you've read one of the newer autobiographies, Chasing Bright Medusas, and a letter in there by Willa Cather. She speaks pretty poorly of homosexuality, and I was just wondering if you knew how she felt, how she saw her relationship with Edith.
As far as I could tell from any reading I've done, she never mentioned it ever. There are, there are a lot of personal letters that she's written to people and stuff, but she just never mentioned that sort of thing. That was nobody's goddamn business, I suppose. You know, it was, there is a school of thought, and Ken probably could talk more about this than I, that any author you read or any artist that you should never say, I don't want to know anything about this person's personal life. Nothing. I don't want to know. But, the human mind goes, I wonder what happened. Boy.
Well, there's, if you guys want to talk about conservatism,
I don't really want to talk about conservatism.
I think we are. The new critics were the critics of the day.
Yeah.
The new critics said, the most conservative, these people came out of the South, they said the only thing you do is you just look at the text. You just look at the text, right? This book, and that's the conservative critics, right? Until postmodernism, right? you look at this voice. I think a professor to bring up lesbianism is totally valid because this voice is androgynous. The narrator's voice, the first person, is androgynous.
Pretty much.
I mean, I don't. Does it feel masculine to you? Does it feel feminine to you? Does it feel like? I mean, it's like. So that's what I would argue, and so then suddenly her life does sort of matter, right? And maybe those letters did matter, and they're burnt, but so.
Sure. Well, echoing the same, what Bill said, let's just keep it in the reign of literary heroes. I have a lot of experience with that. As a teenager, I used to go to California a lot and attend comic book and science fiction conventions. And on 2 different occasions, I met the now deceased sci-fi writer Harlan Ellison, who in the 50s and 60s was just as experimental and explosive voice. I have no mouth and I must scream. And he did all these fabulous anthologies of futuristic writers. And he was really, really hardcore writer. And the first time I met my literary hero, he just ripped, I was like 17, 18 years old. He just ripped me a new asshole. And I've never read the son of a bitch since. And part of it, Harlan Ellison was hardly over. I was a towering 6-foot tall teenager. I'm shorter than that now. And he was a bit over 5 foot. I think he had a Napoleon contract. And he didn't want to be questioned by a towering teenage asshole.
And I get that, but you know what? Look at you, Ken. Look at your relationship with Ed Abbey. You don't read Ed Abbey just for the words. You read it through your relationship with him.
I knew. Yeah, they're right. I've been privileged to know an awful lot of writers, and like even as Bill pointed out, the day I met Willa Cather.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Not true.
Yeah.
But no, and we're all human beings, and we all have flaws. And now that judgment seems to be rendered about anything in a matter of seconds or minutes, and instead of over lifetimes as it used to be, I think we have to be wary of that. It just, how do you know? Did you ever know the person? And it's like,
right on. But say so the two topics that have come up. The sun. I'm sorry. Does this?
Can people hear him?
Am I hogging the thing?
Yeah, you are. But go ahead. It's okay.
We like hogs.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. If anybody would like to jump in, though, raise your hand and I'll cut him off immediately.
Yeah, right on. Please do. The Mormon sunflowers, right, leading to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there was a lot of Henry Miller, and came across the Utah and thought, boy, the Mormons are cool because they're so independent, right? So there was sort of like that notion. There was that connection with the early Mormons that was really, but she also got colonialism and the problems of colonialism.
Mm.
And so she might be like conservative in some ways, but she was already critiquing, and death comes from the archbishop. She's got this whole scene where the missionary is in a sweat house and has this epiphany. So she was really, I think, more than saying, okay, she's a lesbian, she's this or that, I think it's more important to recognize that we're all really complex human beings, and that categorization is more of the problem rather than saying, she actually did this and that's what she is, mm-hmm. or she did this and that's what she is. That's
no, I can't. I couldn't find it right now. But there's actually some quote from her from Willa Cather that says, what some people appear to be on the surface, that may be what they are, but there are other things inside them as well that make up a whole person. But I just would go back to say this whole idea of whether she was a lesbian or not. it doesn't have really that much to do with the writing itself. It's, if you want to find although I know there are doctoral dissertations written on it, saying, here's another example of lesbianism in My Ántonia. But that's just somebody who wants to, get their chops and have a dissertation to write and then go ruin the minds of college students for the rest of.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 in the back.
Who?
I hadn't read it till this month. My friend here turned me on to it. I haven't read My Ántonia, but I did read Death Comes for the Archbishop. And the uniqueness of reading a Western without a cowboy hat.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yes. And the ending of describing the arrival toward death and the timelessness that arrives of looking back to memories of like being outside of time, and when he was starting to go in, everybody thinks there was a disconnect from the mind, but it was just more interesting to review the memories than the present moment. And I thought that was really beautiful. As somebody who's kind of afraid of dying, it was a very touching.
Yeah, there's that whole passage in My Ántonia about how you just, it's sort of Zen. It's like you will become one with everything, essentially. Yeah, and now somebody else?
Yep.
This may be a very simplistic view of it with her sexuality, but I do believe it mattered in the fact that it informed her writing. If you're living in a time with boundaries, and her romantic view of the fenceless landscape, right? And if you think about what a plow does and how it breaks up the earth,
Wow. Yeah.
right? And it allows for a seed to be planted. I would offer that her sexuality mattered, even though she wanted to keep it private. That would be her prerogative, right? But I believe that it informed her writing with the way that she romanticized the frontier and the possibility, right? In the image, that's what I think, Bill, when you talk about the plow.
Yeah. So I mean, what you're saying is, I can't. I'm a little hard of hearing from doing radio for so many years, but
the plow was rapist, Bill.
What? Did I write that you think that there is a longing in this writing? There is a longing in this writing.
If we're thinking about the time that she was writing, right, the time that she was born in and writing in when there's boundaries, right? And so her romanticizing this frontier, right? And what does the frontier symbolize? It's possibility, right? And I feel like a lot of times, sexuality can be the birthplace of creativity, right? And so when we say it doesn't matter, we're not casting, it's not a judgment, I think there's so much beauty.
Listen to this from My Ántonia. This is when Jim goes back finally to see her, and she's now got 84 kids and is speaking mostly Bohemian instead of English anymore. But this is after they've spent a little time together. This is what Jim says to her. She says, Ántonia, do you know, Ántonia, since I've been away, I think of you. I think of you more often than anyone else in this part of the world. So this is Jim talking, but it's Willa Cather talking, I think. I have liked to have had you for a sweetheart, or a wife, or my mother, or my sister, anything that a woman can be to a man. The idea of you is part of my mind. You influence my likes and dislikes, all my tastes, hundreds of times when I don't even realize it. You really are a part of me.
Yeah. And, we've been focused today on My Ántonia. This gentleman brought up one of her brilliant later novels, Death Comes for the Archbishop. But we don't mean the rest of the Plains trilogy. Virtually most of what she wrote is brilliant. And as I'm finding joy in rediscovering My Ántonia, I'm going to try and stay on that journey and keep rereading the books that I read so many decades ago. I'll tell you one funny.
What do you recommend? I mean,
the whole Plains, one of ours.
Pioneers.
Oh, Pioneers, one of ours, and obviously this one. Death Comes the Archbishop, one of his her greatest later novels. And I got to tell you a funny story about Willa Cather. In a lifetime ago, I still have my Dream Garden Press, my little publishing company, but I started it with Edward Abbey. In 1982, I started publishing an Edward Abbey Western Wilderness calendar. I did it for 10 years, and by the time I was done with it, I was publishing a line of 17 different wilderness and national park calendars. That's a way too long story to tell, and it has a really, really sad ending. But during those years...
You're still here, Ken. Yeah, you're still here.
Somehow, God knows. So after the first year, it was an all Edward Abbey calendar, and I can't just keep... So I tried to bring in I found another author, but I couldn't figure out another author. I could do a whole calendar. Wallace Davis, like an Everett Rooster, but no one would know. So I ended up expanding it, and I started with 4 authors per year, and over its 10-year life, I did a dozen authors. Each author got a month. Now, it's my calendar, so I can define Western wilderness however I choose to. I used, over the years, Hunter S. Thompson, celebrating the wilderness inside of us, the wildness. And I cannot tell you how many authors, many of them just completely and utterly obscure, that nobody but maybe me and a few others would know. And any living author I ever approached was flattered and allowed me to do it. Even Hunter S. Thompson, my secretary at the Dream Garden office says, somebody's on the phone for you. They say their name's Hunter S. Thompson. So I go, hello? Yeah, this is Hunter S. Thompson. Look, I got those calendars you sent me. Yeah, they look good. So, yeah, just tell you what, I'll let you do it, but I want to send copies to all my friends for Christmas. And then tries to do a sales pitch on me by telling me this mailing list could be very valuable to you. Like he's trying to con me out of 100 calendars. And I said, Hunter, if I'm happy to give them to you, you don't have to do anything. If you'd like me to mail them for you, send me the mailing list. Happy to do that. Or I'll just send the 100 to you and you can mail them out. But he was trying to give me this sales pitch to con me. And so I never heard from him again. The calendars come out. I sent him the 100. Last time I ever heard from the guy. Never got the mailing list. So all these living authors, gracious, and let me do whatever I wanted, from Wallace Stegner to you name it. But when I started dealing with dead authors' estates, then usually I could get away if I even offered them like $100 to let me do it. But that's when I encountered Charles Cather III, executor of the Willa Cather Trust. Holy Mother of God!
Well, if you go to their website, it's a pretty tied up bunch. You can kind of tell there.
So Mr. Cather said, well, we just can't have Ms. Cather's name sullied by all these other lesser authors. If you would like to send me a proposal to do a Willa Cather calendar, we would be happy to entertain such. Needless to say, Willa Cather never appeared in the pages of my Western Wilderness calendar, and I, by God, never did a Willa Cather calendar. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, one
stuffed shirt bunch.
Just one Willa Cather. Yeah, one page would have been okay.
The literary genius didn't fall from the tree.
What month? What month do you suppose?
If it did, it splat on the ground.
What month
and
do you
the
suppose
fruit rotted?
What month do you suppose Willa Cather might have been in a calendar?
I think we'd have to have the dead of winter.
A dead of winter. Oh. I got the impression that she didn't have very much fun. Mm-hmm. She was not somebody who liked to have fun, and I read a little blurb about she was really quite well known in her sort of mid to later life, well known enough that she lived in New York for 40 years, that she couldn't go out without being recognized. And she hated that. I sit on a park bench in the park and people come up and say, "Oh, Miss Cather." She just hated it. She hated the celebrity of it.
Well,
I love celebrity.
Bill,
people recognize me. You bet. Come on, bring it on.
We can't
Remember,
all be
Bill likes a
media
double.
whores, Bill.
What?
We can't all be media whores.
No. Just I'm a media whore through and through. Just bring it on. I don't care. People do ask me sometimes, does it bug you when people come up to you and say hello? And absolutely not, because I say to them, thank you. You are responsible for me being able to put food on my children's table. So I don't understand celebrities who shoo away the public.
No photos.
No photos. No.
Yeah.
I mean, now I certainly people who have celebrity like Tom Cruise or Ken Sanders, it's
When I'm
to
getting
shoo them
the
away.
images
That's an
confused,
insult, sir. I ain't no effing Scientologist. You want to go one-on-one here, boy?
Come
on, put the script away.
No.
Put the script away,
What am I
Bill.
supposed to say to Ken now?
Yeah.
Let's see.
That was pretty good.
Anybody
That was
else
not on the script.
Anyone else,
Come on,
please?
More comments?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yes,
Yeah.
you got one.
You're going to have to listen to us otherwise.
This time I read it through the eyes of my grandmother and great-grandmother, because my great-grandmother was a Danish immigrant who, my grandmother was born in the sod house, and she and my grandfather were very, very successful, but there was a sweet spot between the mid-19 teens into probably 1930 where women, like my grandmother, traveled to Europe. My paternal grandmother traveled to Europe. She was an only child. My maternal grandmother, they traveled all over the West. They lived the high life. And so there was that sweet spot where I think, where she was living in Soho, that there was a lot of freedom for women that went away really fast too. They just got the right to vote, and then I think the world changed. But I think we kind of underestimate too that women did have that sweet spot for a few years then.
I find it hard to understand what you're saying about that, because I just
they traveled, they worked. My grandmother had a career, and of course that was subsumed by her husband, by my grandfather's career. But women, Margaret Sanger was out there talking about reproductive,
and she was reviled.
Yeah, she was, but there were women who there was that sweet.
Well, this sounds like I want to develop this into an argument, and I don't. It's just women have. I'm sorry. I just on behalf of all men, I apologize.
Dawson, turn Bill's mic off right at this point. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I know there have always been successful women, but it's so much harder for them to do it. This is why Ken wanted to bring Willa Cather to the fore, I think.
Bill and I are both aging white males.
Ken is an aging white male. I am forever young.
Okay.
Forever young.
But
I want to be.
I grew up in South Salt Lake. I met the first African American person in my life in junior high school when I was 14 effing years old. What in God's name did I know about minorities, about women, and the different paths that different ethnic, cultural identities, and obviously women aren't minorities, and what the struggles. And I know of the 24 of you here today, 4 are men and 20 are women. Is it because we're doing a female author? I don't know, and I'm not saying
No, because girls are smarter.
I will not. I'll concede you. I'll cede on that one, Jim. But what I like to think, to the extent that I can, that I'm not that person anymore. I do see, to the extent I can't ever understand what it's going to be like for someone in different sets. I grew up not middle class for sure. God, I never went without a meal in my life. But we didn't have a lot of money growing up, going out to restaurants and stuff. We didn't fly on an airplane. We didn't do that stuff. But I've led, without knowing it, a privileged life. I know that now. And I'm trying, Bill, to do what I can to make up for it.
Well, and that's all we can do. Same, I grew up in Ogden, which, compared to Salt Lake, Ogden, the melting pot of Utah. It's the
more of a burning cauldron, I think.
But but my mother was, I guess she was a liberal humanist of some sort, who always taught me that you are no better than anyone else, and that she didn't teach me enough about women, though. She really didn't. But as far as ethnicities and all of that, we're all just people. I wish I'd learned more about. I don't understand you women. I don't know.
Bill,
I love you.
Bill, I had a single younger brother. Did you have sisters?
I had a very younger sister, yeah. But, it's, we have to wrap it up here, I think. But I was just going to say about women, this is okay. So when high school reunion time, and they called me up and asked me if I wanted to go.
Here we go. Buckle up, people.
If I wanted to go to a high school reunion.
Nope.
And I said, well, what's going on with the high school reunion? And they said, well, all the guys are going to get together and do this activity, and then all the women are going to get together and do this activity. So, and then everybody gets together for a final activity. And they said, so you want to do the guy activity? And I said, well, why would I want to do that? I know what guys are like. I want to go hang out with the women because I don't know what they're like. And I really would like to know more, and I've always said I would rather hang around with a bunch of women than a bunch of guys because you are unique and fascinating and different from me. You're different. We are different.
They even have different parts.
What?
From what
Wait
I
a minute, I haven't heard that.
From what I've heard.
I haven't heard that.
I have.
All right,
I think we're getting a little off topic.
Who are we going to do?
Okay.
All right, what are we going to do next time?
Next month, Wendell Berry. 90 years old, written 80 books. I've had the privilege of knowing Wendell Berry for more than 40 years. On 4 occasions, I've made pilgrimages to Port Royal, Kentucky, his home, and stayed with he and his wife and life partner, Tanya.
You want to recommend one collection or?
I'm not quite done yet, Bill.
What? Jimmy keeps going. Wrap it up.
We're supposed to go to 5. It's 4:30.
We're on a commercial.
No, we're not doing commercial breaks, Jimmy. Sheesh.
Who do you think's paying for all this?
Wine Academy.
Yeah, he inserts Wine Academy of Utah commercials.
Yeah, to fill up the 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So
this next programming brought to you by wineandcanofutah.com.
Check us out on YouTube.
Wendell Berry was in the Stanford Writing School class started by Ogdenite Richard Scowcroft and Wallace Stegner in the famous 1960 class that featured Ken Kesey, which featured Edward Abbey, who dropped out, Mary Oliver, Robert Stone, Ed McClanahan, Wendell Berry, and another really big one that I'm forgetting right now. They were all in the same class at Stanford. They were all unknowns at the time. So Wendell...
Hell of a class.
Yeah, they were youngsters. Wendell Berry published his first novel in 1960, and on the Coulter family. It's called Nathan Coulter. In 1963, he wrote a poem that appeared in The Nation with Ben Shahn illustrations called November 22nd, that he talked about his views on the funeral of the assassinated President John F. Kennedy, and it bolted him to instant fame. He has been a farmer, a philosopher, a novelist, essayist, poet, and activist ever since. The Unsettling of America, Sarah Club, 1977, recollected essays, 3 short novels, The Way of Ignorance, The Gift of Good Land, Another Turn of the Crank, and 75 others. But this 10-year-old volume of poetry, Leavings, I heard, I'm going to read 2 short poems. On the theory of the Big Bang is the origin of the universe. 1, what banged? 2, before banging, how did it get there? I love this guy. 3, when it got there, where was it?
Profound.
So, live on Terry Gross, NPR, I happened to hear Wendell
Fresh Air
read this poem out loud. Questionnaire. 1, how much poison are you willing to eat for the success of the free market and global trade? Please name your preferred poisons. 2, for the sake of goodness, how much evil are you willing to do? Fill in the following blanks with the names of your favorite evils and acts of hatred. 3, what sacrifices are you prepared to make for culture and civilization? Please list the monuments, shrines, and works of art you would most willingly destroy. 4, in the name of patriotism and the flag, how much of our beloved land are you willing to desecrate? List in the following spaces the mountains, rivers, towns, farms you could most readily do without. 5, state briefly the ideas, ideals, or hopes, the energy sources, the kinds of security for which you would kill a child. Name, please, the children you would be willing to kill.
What's the name of that?
Questionnaire.
Wendell Berry.
As I said, I heard Wendell read that live on Terry Gross's Fresh Air. I happened to be talking to Wendell on the phone later this week, and I said, Wendell, where on earth did that poem come from? And he paused, and in that rolling Kentucky accent of his that I can't do, he said, well, Ken, it's what happens to a fella when you write a poem when you're really, really angry. Wendell Berry, next month. Do we know a date? What's the date? Anybody know the date?
We do know the date, just not at this moment.
Well,
and we...
Natalie, where are you?
So do you recommend any one place to start with Wendell Berry?
April 18th.
April 18th, 3 to 5 p.m.
19th.
19th. Thank you, Dawson.
I'm trying.
All right. That it?
Thank you everybody for joining us. What do you think? Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Dawson on control. Dawson, I'm down. Thank you, Dawson on control. I would like to thank the Ken Sanders staff here for putting all this together. Thank you guys so much for doing this.
Thank you, especially Natalie, Will, and Kevin. Thank you, Dawson. Thanks to the Leonardo catering staff, Deb Stiegel.
Chef Deb.
Yep. And thanks to Ken Sanders, because he's a legend. And if you have any comments or questions, you can go to the letsgoeatshow.com.
At gmail.com.
At gmail.com. The Let's Go Eat Show at gmail.com. Thank you, Dawson. Even though you forgot the cord, you come in handy.
I try.
That's it, everybody. Remember, if you're pouring the drinks, always make mine a double.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Literary Libations is a presentation of the Let's Go Eat and Drink Show in association with the Wine Academy of Utah, Ken Sanders Rare Books, and the Leonardo Museum at Library Square in Salt Lake City. For more information on the Wine Academy of Utah, it's wineacademyofutah.com. Discover exhibits and programs offered by the Leonardo at theleonardo.org. Ken Sanders Rare Books is an eclectic bookstore located inside the Leonardo Museum and can be found at kensandersbooks.com. And for the Let's Go Eat and Drink Show, search your favorite podcast app. And that about does her. I'm Zach Caton, and as the late Paul Harvey used to say, good day.